It began as an ordinary visit to my doctor. Lately, I'd been feeling off. Nothing dramatic, just a persistent unease. So I booked a checkup expecting the usual. A quick exam, maybe a prescription, and then back to life. When the doctor walked in, I was surprised. She was a woman. Dr. Johnson was middle-aged, with short blonde hair and warm, steady eyes. She greeted me with a calm professionalism and asked me to lie back on the exam table. From the first moments, I noticed she was taking thorough notes. Her questions were detailed, about my daily habits, my diet, sleep, stress, and any changes I'd noticed. Then the physical exam began. She was methodical and attentive, pausing occasionally to jot something down. After a few minutes, she sat down beside me and, with a serious tenderness, told me something I hadn't expected. She suspected a hormonal imbalance. The phrase landed oddly. I'd never given much thought to hormones beyond the vague idea that they occasionally caused mood swings. Dr. Johnson explained patiently. My body appeared to be producing an excessive amount of testosterone, she said, which could explain the symptoms I'd been feeling. She reassured me that this was a relatively common issue and that it could be treated, but that treatment would require careful management to avoid long-term complications. Relief and confusion mixed together. Relief because the problem sounded manageable, confusion because I didn't really understand what this would mean for my body and my life. She said more tests were needed to confirm the diagnosis, and that, if confirmed, hormone replacement therapy would likely be recommended to restore balance. I listened and tried to absorb each sentence as she described next steps and possible outcomes. Before we moved on, she paused and offered a candid warning about the medication. There are side effects, she said. They're usually reversible, but you should know what to expect. Her tone was gentle but clear. She listed several potential changes: a reduction in body hair, a decrease in muscle mass, shifts in mood. Then, carefully, she added that the treatment sometimes results in breast development. For a moment, the words hardly registered. Breast development. I'd never imagined myself with breasts. The idea felt foreign and oddly surreal. Despite that, an unexpected flutter of excitement stirred inside me. Perhaps she noticed my reaction because she quickly reassured me. These effects were side effects, she emphasized, typically reversible and carefully monitored, and she wanted to make sure I was fully informed before consenting to treatment. I left the clinic with a jumble of emotions. Part of me was grateful the issue was treatable. Part of me was bewildered by the possibility of such pronounced physical change. And, unaccountably, part of me felt curious, perhaps even a little eager, about what these changes might bring. Over the following days, I completed the tests Dr. Johnson had ordered and was referred to an endocrinologist to determine the most appropriate therapy. When the results returned, the diagnosis was confirmed. The imbalance was real, and the specialist recommended hormone replacement therapy as the best course. I remember the moment the treatment plan was laid out. It felt both clinical and life-altering. I began the therapy cautiously, aware of the potential for change, and I watched myself closely for any sign that the medication was taking hold. The changes started sooner than I expected. Within a few days, I noticed my body hair thinning and my muscles feeling less dense. Initially, those shifts unnerved me. I had always been conscious of my build, and it felt strange to watch it soften. But as weeks passed, my feelings evolved. The roughness of my skin diminished, and the contours of my physique gradually shifted. I found myself appreciating the softer textures and the way my clothes draped differently. Little comforts emerged where anxiety had once been. Then, one morning, my chest felt tender. At first, I imagined a pulled muscle or a sensitivity from sleeping awkwardly. Gradually, the tenderness resolved into a new reality. My breasts were beginning to develop. Standing in the quiet of my bathroom, I touched my chest and felt the unmistakable, faint fullness beneath the skin. The sensation was at once thrilling and daunting. It was one thing to have been told what might happen. It was another to feel the body changing in tangible, intimate ways. Back at the clinic, Dr. Johnson confirmed what I suspected. The breast growth was a known effect of the therapy. In a practical, matter-of-fact way, she measured me for a bra and recommended support to ease the discomfort. Buying my first bra at 25 was oddly ceremonial. I felt a strange mixture of embarrassment, curiosity, and exhilaration as I selected something designed for a body I had not prepared to inhabit. Wearing it for the first time under my shirt felt both foreign and natural. More changes followed. My face softened. My facial features seemed to take on gentler lines. My skin acquired a smoother quality that made me linger at reflections longer than I used to. I caught myself studying my profile and noticing subtleties I'd never paid attention to before. Each change brought a ripple of emotion, sometimes a pang of loss for masculinity I had always assumed as fixed, sometimes a rush of pleasure at discovering a side of myself that fit in ways I hadn't expected. Alongside the physical shifts, my inner world began to move. I found my interest in femininity growing from a curiosity to a yearning. I daydreamed more, imagining how it would feel to wear different clothes or to present myself in a softer, more traditionally feminine way. Those fantasies stayed private at first, small secret rehearsals that lived in the quiet moments of the day. Eventually, curiosity overcame caution. I started in private, ordering lingerie online and testing the sensation in the privacy of my home. The first time I slid into lacy underwear or a silky nightgown, I was surprised by how complete the feeling was, how the fabric settled, how it framed my changing shape, and how it seemed to validate something that had been percolating beneath the surface for a long time. It was intimate and quietly powerful, like finding the right word after fumbling for a sentence. With each small experiment, my confidence grew. I moved from lingerie to dresses and skirts, choosing styles that accentuated the curves I was beginning to see in the mirror. At home, alone, I reveled in the textures and fits, in the way certain fabrics hugged the contours of my body. The mirror became a companion. The reflection was no longer just an image to scrutinize, but a person I wanted to meet. Fear lingered, particularly about being seen. I worried about discovery. Who would understand? Who might judge? The thought of being recognized in public while dressed this way felt terrifying. But the more I indulged the new expressions of myself, the less the fear controlled me. My outings started small, a quick trip to the corner store in a skirt, a cautious walk down a familiar street. Each time I stepped out, I measured the risk, felt the adrenaline, and then noticed a new steadiness in how I moved. The world didn't react as loudly as my anxiety predicted. Some people didn't look twice. Others gave me curious glances. Those moments were instructive. I learned to manage the nervousness, to breathe through the sudden awareness of being noticed, and to savor the subtle triumphs, the tiny victories of existing as I felt inside. What began as a clinical visit had unfurled into a profound reconfiguration of my body and my inner life. Hormone therapy had physical effects I had only half expected, and those effects opened a door to experiences and feelings I hadn't anticipated. I didn't receive a single, definitive answer about who I was or what I would become. Instead, I encountered a process, a slow remaking where parts of me softened and shifted, where tastes and desires adjusted, and where I discovered pleasure in forms of expression that had once seemed remote. Through the months that followed, I navigated practical concerns and emotional questions. I learned to care for my changing body, to choose clothing that fit my new contours, and to think about how I wanted to present myself to the world. I also learned to tolerate, and sometimes to welcome, the uncertainty. Some days, I missed the old familiarity of my former appearance. Other days, I felt a surge of joy at the thought that my life was expanding into possibilities I'd never imagined. My journey was not a neat arc from problem to solution. It was messy and complicated, marked by medical appointments and wardrobe experiments, moments of private elation and public unease. But through it all, I discovered a greater honesty with myself. The hormonal treatment had triggered changes I hadn't planned for, and with those changes came new questions about identity, presentation, and desire, questions I was learning to answer, step by uncertain step. In the end, the routine checkup that had seemed so prosaic became the first page of a story I'm still writing. My body changed under medical guidance, and those physical changes unlocked desires and curiosities that had been quietly waiting. I am still figuring out where this path will lead, and that uncertainty feels less like a threat and more like an invitation an opening to explore who I might become. Nervousness clung to me as I stepped into the post office for the first time dressed the way I had been experimenting with. I worried people would stare or jeer, imagining the worst. To my astonishment, most customers barely glanced my way. That first outing, small and tentative, surprised me. Anonymity sheltered me, and with it came a budding confidence. As days passed and I pushed my boundaries, strangers sometimes responded in ways that warmed me. Once, an elderly gentleman at the grocery store held the door open, smiled kindly, and told me, "You look lovely, my dear." The brief exchange hummed inside me for hours, a tiny, incandescent validation that felt like recognition. Not everyone was gentle. I encountered rude stares and curt comments on occasion, reminders that not every space is safe. Still, the possibility of being seen in this different guise felt more compelling than the fear. I was discovering a facet of myself I hadn't known existed, and I wanted to explore it without holding back. As my wardrobe grew, so did my curiosity about presentation. I dove into makeup tutorials online, practicing foundation, mascara, and lipstick until the techniques felt second nature. Applying makeup turned into a ritual, each brushstroke and blending motion an exercise in reshaping the face I saw in the mirror. Gradually, I felt ready to wear makeup beyond the bedroom, first for short errands, then for longer outings. Weekends began to stretch into longer periods where I embodied an alter ego, a woman I called Amanda. Those hours felt like living inside a parallel life, secret and exhilarating. It was thrilling to perform that identity in private, and enormously satisfying to let it seep into small public moments as well. Even as I surrendered to the joy of dressing and presenting differently, questions stirred beneath the surface. I wondered, was this who I truly was? Was it a passing phase or something deeper? Anxiety about discovery lingered. The thought of loved ones or coworkers finding out tightened my chest. Still, the more I tried on different looks and roles, the more convinced I became that appearances alone weren't enough to quiet the unrest. I wanted my inward sense of self to match my outward form. It was one thing to adopt feminine clothes and gestures, it was another to feel my body itself align with those feelings. That realization pushed me to speak with Dr. Martinez, the physician who had originally overseen my hormone therapy. I had heard she worked with patients seeking gender-affirming care, and I hoped she could help me understand the options. Entering her office felt like stepping into another threshold of possibility. Fear and hope braided together. Dr. Martinez received me with the same calm professionalism I had come to expect. She asked how I'd been responding to hormones, listened as I described the changes and the stirrings inside me, and then asked gentle, precise questions about identity, goals, and expectations. I answered as honestly as I could, feeling both exposed and relieved. She reminded me that uncertainty is normal and that many people find themselves weighing similar choices. "You're not alone," she said, and the words steadied me. We reviewed the range of gender-affirming procedures, discussing what each could achieve and the trade-offs involved: breast augmentation, facial feminization, and genital reconstruction among them. Dr. Martinez explained the risks, the expected recovery, and the ways each operation could reshape not just appearance, but daily life. As she outlined the steps, a heavy fog lifted. Suddenly a path forward revealed itself, not a single answer, but options and the medical support to pursue them responsibly. Leaving that appointment, I felt empowered. For the first time, I had a plan that matched the longing I'd been carrying. But I also knew the road ahead would be complicated. Procedures could be costly, and not everyone in my life would understand or endorse my choices. Still, the sense of finally moving toward alignment outweighed those obstacles. I spent the next weeks researching and consulting with specialists to tailor a treatment plan. We decided to begin with breast augmentation, a procedure that offered a relatively short recovery and the potential for significant, tangible alignment between body and identity. On the morning of surgery, my nerves were taut, but beneath them ran a quiet certainty. The operation went smoothly, and waking up with breasts that looked and felt natural was a moment of profound relief, a fulfillment of a need I'd felt for years, but never named outright. Transitioning did not erase difficulty. I faced opposition and insensitive remarks from some people. There were uncomfortable encounters and moments when strangers behaved as if they had a right to judge or demean. Those experiences were painful, and I learned to navigate them cautiously, choosing when to explain, when to walk away, and when to protect my peace. At the same time, there were bright, sustaining surprises. I found warm friendship in LGBTQ+ circles, people who offered practical advice and emotional support without judgment. New allies appeared in unexpected corners of life, and their acceptance mattered in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Each step through transition brought both setbacks and triumphs. I adjusted to recovery timelines, worked through emotional upheavals, and learned to be patient with a process that doesn't unfold on demand. But there were also moments of pure joy. The first time I bought clothes that fit comfortably, the day I introduced myself with a name that finally felt right, the ordinary mornings when I woke and felt at home in my skin. Today I live with more confidence and peace. I have undergone several gender-affirming procedures and continue to collaborate with doctors and therapists to manage hormones and support my mental health. The journey hasn't been linear or easy, but it has been deeply rewarding. I have learned to accept myself with compassion, and I've found community among people who know how to hold each other through complex change. If you're considering gender-affirming care or beginning to explore your gender, my advice is simple. Be patient and gentle with yourself. Do the research, talk to professionals you trust, and connect with others who have walked similar paths. The work of aligning your body with your inner sense of self can be demanding financially and emotionally, but it can also open the door to profound relief and authenticity. It won't erase all challenges, but it can bring you closer to living a life that reflects who you truly are.